here is with me, and we're going to lay out a few ground rules here to get going.
Okay, well, good morning, everybody. Thank you all for coming. As we had mentioned yesterday, we have these series of kind of deep dives and focus groups where we're topic specific, trying to drill down into more detail on what we need to know for writing the plan of the community. And so to that nature, this meeting is actually called Moving Around the Village. And so we have some questions that we would like to ask to spur conversation, but these are really free-form meetings and kind of your meetings, so we'll take them as we go. Just a couple of things. If we can just kind of respect each other and let one thought come on before the next and try to avoid some of the sidebar conversations, it'll be less distracting. I'm going to try and take notes while Scott actually leads the meeting that we're here. And again, if anybody needs to make a comment that's specific to a location, we have these maps, and I'll actually take the marker and put the recommendation on the map for you as well. So to that end, let me, if we can just go around the room really quickly so we kind of know who's in the room, and maybe if you just tell us in very short words kind of your, whatever your transportation really passion or issue is that brought you to this meeting.
John Root, my passion is the big circle.
Okay, thank you.
And McAllister, just the increase of all the traffic that has occurred.
Okay.
We've been here for 20 years, and it's just gotten so much worse.
Gotcha. Okay. Fantastic. Thank you for coming. Okay.
Bird Higgins live in Doral Woods. I'm all for use of transportation modes. I just like to have kids originally these things, late places, transportation sets as opposed to little places.
Okay.
I'm Judy Rice. I live in Doral Woods also. That's after Morgan Road. I've been here, I'm a Moore County native, but I've been in Converse 3 years now. And I've seen so much more increase in traffic on North 11. I'm concerned about the safety of the crossings there. They go by here way too fast, and there's been problems.
Okay. Okay.
You know, in a reasonable, and I think the circle even is in that category. People, I used to ride my bike down Midland Road. I can't get there now. You know, I can't get through the circle to get down Midland Road. So I think it's kind of the big picture of how do you deal with the fact of all these state roads splitting neighborhoods. That would probably be my passion.
Okay. Got it.
Stephanie Goodrich, I'm also in the planning department here.
Wait a minute. What's your guys' passion with transportation? Let one guy do it. I mean, we don't know.
Sort of like everybody's sort of echoing, just connections to, we have a lot of neighborhoods that are, you know, maybe one entrance, one out, we've got a lot of neighborhoods to, just maybe if the traffic circle is an issue or other places, finding maybe potentially alternatives that people can sort of navigate around and get to their destination easier or more efficiently.
And my passion is preserving the Olmsted plan and the plantations around that, in addition to life and safety concerns of increased traffic.
You know better too.
I don't know.
I'm Alex Cameron. I'm also with the planning department, and not to get off easy, but to echo my colleagues' concerns and passions. The curvilinear streets that we know that kind of give the special character there, the village center area, to keep and preserve that, as well as try to ease the concerns of the congestion that is echoed quite often.
I'm Leo Santawaso. I'm the chairman of the Village Planning and Zoning Board. My passion is an update of the old thoroughfare plan. And I think that thoroughfare plan, like a street plan, that is woefully inadequate now, needs to be updated and modernized. And I think with that, a lot of the questions and concerns could be addressed and I won't say resolved, but at least the plan would be laid out so that the village can dole out the dollars when they're available to make some improvements.
I'm Colette Klinsky, and right now I have no particular passion on the traffic except to see what's going on. But I do like the trolleys.
Hi, I'm Gloria Hannon. I'm a fairly new resident here. There are two things. One, as I travel around the village, it doesn't impact me in my neighborhood, but I see some residential streets that are being used as cutoffs, going from Linden over to 211, where trucks are going through, where they're not supposed to be going through, and how that's impacting the people in those neighborhoods. Or from Beulah Hill across Mackenzie and then over to 211. So that, I mean, I have come down with my car and almost been forced off the road by some things. That's how it impacts me, but I think of the residents in that area. The second thing is I would like to bike. I would like to use my bike here. And I don't see what's the word I want? A mindset of biking. I would be afraid to be on some of these roads because there isn't enough courtesy towards bikers. And a part of that can be, from where I moved from, part of that can be addressed with signage warning drivers that the bikes have rights on these roads, and also having strict speed limits. Thank you.
Lovely. We had a latecomer just introducing ourselves.
What's your passion? What's your passion, man?
Quality of life is my passion.
Fantastic. Okay, well, like I said, you know, this conversation's allowed to go where you want to take it, but there is one question I would like to just throw out there to start conversation, and it builds off of what we were doing last night during the presentation and some of the struggles we're looking with and want to work through this week. So I've coined it character versus congestion. And you have some beautiful, beautiful two-lane roads and things that are here. And as you'd mentioned, at peak times at least, there's a lot of traffic demand on those. When they get full, they kind of, just like water, want to flood into the next road and the next road. And you mentioned some of the cut-through traffic. And so as we try to work through some issues and some, I guess, solutions, what should we keep in mind? Is it okay for something to be and stay congested because we wouldn't want to lose the character in widening a road? Or is it better to have efficient infrastructure and it's all about the design? Because in some places, like when I used to work in Tallahassee, Florida, we actually had policy constrained roads because we didn't want to lose our oak canopies with the hanging moss and things. And we said we'd rather you find another way to get around town than widen this road out. And so I'd like to hear kind of your opinions of that, because as we start to think about this transportation system, if there's areas that we just do not want to widen, we need to know that, so we look for alternatives.
Using these, I see. I got here a little late too, so my passion is connectivity, which I think relates directly to what you're saying. Connectivity, from my point of view, in a transportation sense, is really non-car, non-truck. connectivity. That is, using the greenways or expanding them, using potentially bike trails, and generally walking possibilities from as many neighborhoods who feel they, and people who feel they can walk to the core area of the village or to another neighborhood. And we have a lot of gaps that I think we could fill with a little help and a little direction. Excuse me.
Do we have a feel for, in the data that maybe you've gathered, how much of the traffic is pass-through and how much of it is residential or community? And last night there was a comment made that I think they lived at 6, but if they make one trip, okay, it's 4 minutes and it's this and that. But you make 5 trips to get to different places for various reasons throughout the day. Now we're talking about a considerable period of time out of your day that you're waiting for traffic and that kind of thing. So it's like, and who's contributing the most to the problem that we perceive it being? Is it pass-through or is it local? Not local, going to local businesses, but local people trying to navigate through the village.
We don't have a definitive answer on that just yet, but we have the ability to get a pretty good answer on that. So one of the things I think I mentioned last night, if you were here last night, I don't know, but the village has invested in a tool that lets us kind of look at people as they make trips through the area or within the area, and we've started running those numbers. I think the graph I showed last night, we've kind of put stations around the big roads on the outside, and about a third of the trips that we're recording go through one of those stations, either coming or going. 2/3 are coming or ending in internal to the village. And I think I mentioned that about half of those, so a third of all trips, are going through that circle. So it's, it's not dominant one way or the other. Where a lot of these trips are long trips, though, 16 to 20 miles going through here. And if you just do the math and draw a big circle on a map, you can easily see that a significant chunk are not, starting or finishing here, or at least they're pretty long trips doing it. So, but we're going to get better with that answer.
Something that I took away from last night's presentation is almost the third category of traffic is, I'm not sure that's how you characterize it last night, but traffic service to the village. So if you were to think of those folks who work in the medical community, who are coming from other places, you could almost characterize those folks as serving the village. So it's almost a separate
category of traffic, one that becomes a less pejorative kind of characterization of the traffic than those who are passing through.
Usually in these discussions, we look at the why, I hate to use math here, but there's X's and Y's, there's dependent and independent variables. And the Y is the outcome of something created by an X. And to me, traffic's an outcome. It happens because of. And in a long-range plan, it seems to me we ought to look at the reasons that traffic is occurring, figure out which ones we can control and which ones we can't control, make 2 neat little columns of that stuff and say, okay, I get a feeling we get a lot of non-controllable traffic, frankly. As Bill mentioned, people driving to work in the hospital. Do we want to stop them from driving to work in the hospital? Probably not. I hope not, if I need them, by the way. But it's almost like politics. We throw lots of money at the outcome to try to fix it, but we never fix the cause. I think we really need to look at the causes, create those 2 little neat boxes of what we control, what we can't control. But that doesn't mean we can't make, someone suggested, making a street 4 feet or 3 feet wider for safety reasons. It would allow walkers or bikers perhaps. That's okay, but it's not going to reduce traffic. It may make it safer given the traffic. Once we figure out that, I don't know, I'm throwing a number out, 60% of our traffic is not controllable, or 70 or 80 or 90, whatever it is, then we can perhaps throw money at, make it a safer given. But, until we fix the X's, we're going to have Y's out the wazoo.
Why is that the
Which is a
Wazoo? Write
scientific
that down.
term for
Yeah,
somebody.
that just made the plan, right?
Yeah, so we've got a list of questions here in front of us. We don't anticipate getting through necessarily all of these, and that's fine if we don't. But there's a couple that, like Matt, I had a, want to make sure we get in the table. So I'm looking at this survey. Did you guys take the village survey? Did anybody do that thing? So I got the drafty version here. I guess they do that periodically, and I am not pleased to tell you that the top 5 answers to question number 17, which is which of the public service items should receive the most emphasis in the from the village leaders over the next 2 years, the top 5 are transportation related. Ease of travel through the traffic circle, travel on Highway 5, adequacy of street lighting, availability of walkways, and maintenance of streets. So literally the top 5 attention getters are the focus of at least part of this meeting. So we know about, we're starting to learn a little bit about the circle, but, and we know there's this proposition between traffic capacity through the village versus around, and there's a lot of controversy about all of that. And, but, and then there's been other plans done here that have very specific stuff. Like I was looking at the pedestrian plan. I got in here early this morning. It was just me and about 18 crickets. And looking at the pedestrian plan done in 2015, and they went through stuff like Juniper Creek and 15501. That intersection's hard to walk through. Well, yeah, it's a big road, and I'm sure it probably is. So you can get really specific like that, and I encourage people to be really selfish. And because what I don't know is what you all know, because I don't live here. I'm the proverbial expert. I come from an hour away. So apart from the big things that people talk about probably every day, and we're on the survey, did you agree with the things I just said on the survey, or the specific things you want to make sure that we address?
Read them again, please.
I will. Traffic circle, Highway 5 traffic, street lighting, availability of walkways, and maintenance of the streets. I'm going to pick one of these and talk about trade-offs, right? Because there's always trade-offs in life. Street lighting. So when you drive around or walk around at night, it's pretty dark, and I think that's probably on purpose. Yeah, so when someone says, we should focus on street lighting, inform me, what do you think that survey response meant, just for that one narrow?
That's what the village staff's been trying to figure out, right, Jeff, for about 10 years now. And
Was it big streets, little streets?
that's the issue, and I think the question is, do people respond to that, meaning they want more light because they can't see or they want to walk? Or they need it for other sort of safety reasons, or they don't want any more lighting at all? It's very difficult to figure that out, and I think looking around the table here and not knowing everybody, but everybody has been aware of this question since they've lived here.
And Scott is really highlighting.
Yeah.
He's really highlighting the difficulty of solving that problem. It's a trade-off. Not everybody views it the same way. Some people view it through the lens of, I really would like to have more streetlights, for example, in my neighborhood so that I can feel safer out there walking with my kids or my dog or my family after dark. And other people just really appreciate the dark. So it's a harder nut to crack.
I came from a place that had a dark skies ordinance, and quite frankly, it's wonderful to be able to.
Wonderful. It's
Where
wonderful.
was that? Where was that?
Sanibel Island, Florida.
Sanibel Island, Florida. Okay.
It's wonderful. I think people don't realize how wonderful it is.
Yeah.
Safety. My goodness, we have the safest area in the state. Maybe
Like we're being mugged.
southeast, I don't know, but I think sometimes it's just a matter of getting used to it.
Yeah.
I would be surprised if people who have lived here a while would list that. I think sometimes it's people that come in and they're used to it, and they haven't acclimated to our preference.
Right.
Or mine, preference for the beautiful night sky.
So that's security. You mentioned safety. So safety can also be viewed at, in terms of crashes. And some of you were here last night and saw that we started pulling some crash data. So there might be some little spot things on some of the major roads where a lot of accidents or crashes are happening in the evening. that we could look at. There's also different kinds of lighting. There's all kinds of lighting. There's very low-level lighting that is, that tall that some people use to help just light the walkway itself so you don't stumble about. And it doesn't, give a lot of pollution. So, we can talk about specific things like that, big and small. So I'm not too worried about that one. Are there the specific things, not lighting, that you want to make sure you throw at me?
We tried.
Literally, or figuratively?
I'm sorry.
Go ahead.
At one point, we tried to solve the problem by suggesting that we put lights at intersections to at least identify where the street is. If you're driving back in the rural residential area, you don't have a clue until you've either passed it or you're on top of it. And we ran into some road bumps there that the people that were close to the intersection didn't want the light on, quote, their house. Well, the lights that are currently available probably would not have shone on their house or their windows or whatever, but still we kind of hesitated to pursue that. I think that would be helpful, just to have lights at intersections.
Yeah, that's kind of what I was talking about. Yeah, that's a
Okay.
good point.
Yeah, I wanted to just add on the lighting thing real quick, and that is, I'm not on either side of it, but the modern lighting shines downward and still keeps a dark upward. I think it would qualify in Sandsville Island, the new modern lighting. So I think education on lighting should be part of this, because, the old style is different than the new style.
Sorry,
Yeah, I apologize.
Well, I believe, though, that the current process allows someone ad hoc to say, I'd like to have a street light. Go to the village and say, I'd like to have a street light. And then there's a little survey done of neighbors, giving them an opportunity to say yay or nay. So it's not impossible to get a street light if you want one, and your neighborhood, immediate neighborhood, thinks it's right. But I had people approach me where I live and say, how do I get a street light? Well, I told them that was the process. Now, either they lost interest or they didn't want to irritate their neighbors, and have them, which is another issue I find all the time, too. But, yeah, it's not impossible to get one if, the locale thinks it's necessary.
It's not a good acid test, though, right? I mean, I might think something, but if my neighbors don't, that helps balance things and helps focus resources. That's not a bad.
It's fine, the process is fine. It's whether people want to follow through with it or not.
It comes about, sorry, I'm going to cut you off. I want to know about parking, though. Parking came up a lot last night, and it has before. So talk to me a little bit about parking. Is it too much, right place? Do we need to get, I guess, in the core area, right? I mean,
We have solved that problem.
Well, I mean,
Very tough right in the middle of the village to find a place to park, to go to the library or to use any of the, businesses. I don't know, I hate to see more, it's one of those things. I hate to see more parking lots. I know at times that I haven't been able to find a parking space. Say, if you want to go to the farmer's market or something like that, that draws people in. I have found problems.
Have you found the old sand lot? Are they still calling it the old sand lot?
no, sometimes
What are they?
we would, but
I mean, my goodness, that's huge now. I mean, we took a whole lot of the green to do that. People may have to walk a little further, but there's a give and take of all of this.
Well, that's what I'm saying, I hate to see more.
I would hate to see any parking lots, more parking lots. At one point, they were trying to do a double-decker or something or other down there.
So do you go out the village staff, you guys think there's a lot of parking, or is it someone maybe?
What we typically hear is concern that comes from the business community downtown. Not so much from the customers that frequent the businesses downtown, but I'm sure they're hearing it from somebody. So what we have done in the past is we've taken, I think we spent about 2 weeks actually gathering data. Police department checked by, once every hour and started counting empty spaces. And what we found was there are periods of the day where you genuinely can't park like on the street in front of the house, front of the business or the place that you want to do business in. But there is almost always parking available in the old sandlot, the parking lot downtown. Now, that's certainly not true for major events. To the extent that that is a frustration for people, I think that's genuine. And we do have a lot of major events. I think the question is it appropriate to build infrastructure for periodic maintenance?
Let's ask that question, because that question can be expanded, right? I mean, do we plan and infrastructureize this village to accommodate the peak hour of traffic, to accommodate the big event? I mean, is that what we're trying to do? Because that has implications. So talk to me about that a little bit. That's a trade-off.
You know, I think an interesting road there is, it might not be advantageous to scale up for our events, but then when you combine it with the big events at the hotel, all of a sudden it makes a lot more sense it being up near the hotel, because their capacity, when they get overdraw it with parking, it spills into the village. So then all of a sudden it's not scaling up for the special event, it's scaling up for village special events and the resort.
And in those cases, the complaints.
What event are you speaking of, Kevin?
What?
What event at the?
Oh, have you ever seen any function they're having at the ballroom? They're parked all over the place, and there's no parking anywhere. So anytime they have, no, those are village events.
Yeah.
I'm trying to separate the two. There's village events, then there's the resort has these big events or big conventions. And I find that when they have big conventions, there's less parking in the village. Would you agree with that?
Absolutely,
So I think there's some symmetry in working with them to solve this solution. That's all I'm trying to do.
She's asking when, and just last night, if anybody came down here for a meeting and went by the hotel,
Yeah.
you would have seen that they were parking
Yeah, parking all over
everywhere.
the street.
And,
Yeah,
yeah,
yeah.
so.
This is where we actually do start hearing complaints from residents. What happens is the parking spills out onto residential streets, and that's the frustration.
I think it would be very difficult to create enough parking, scaling up to large events, and have that parking in an area that would not very dramatically affect the look of the village, the quality of the life of the village. And I don't know how to resolve that, other than we just have always allowed a lot of parking under the longleaf pines, pretty much anywhere you want to go, and that's been a tradition around Pinehurst for 100 years, almost literally. I want to go back to one aspect of your question, people responding to parking concerns, and is that the core village? One of the issues here is that a lot of employees of businesses in the village choose to park in front of the place that they work. This creates a problem for customers, even if there's availability in the sandlot, and we all should use that. But it's very unfair in the minds of most of the people that employees are parking there. And the village has tried over 12 to 20 years now, in my experience, to create situations where employees were encouraged not to do that. And the village government took a whack at that, but really wanted in the end to turn it over to the business guild in its various forms. But the business guild, in my opinion, has not really been able to grapple with that. Yeah. So day by day, week by week, except for major events, the issue of parking in a village comes to who's parking where, and why can't we have employees park in the sandlot, in the lot over by the Pine Crest, wherever else except not in front of the business. And it's the professional businesses, not just the retail stores, that are affected, that do this too.
I agree with that, having a business in the village. You'd think businesses would serve their own best interests by parking in the sandlot, so then that's kind of what we thought would happen, and it hasn't happened. So I think that should be a lead discussion.
Can you make your employees do it?
I do. I fired one. He parked right, he just did it 5 days in a row in front of the Old Sport. So, you got to go. He just told you 5 times, you're gone. So I never had a problem again.
It's interesting that.
You know, so, but, you know, you don't want to do that. But, I mean, it was just somebody that just, it probably was a bigger issue beyond him parking, you know. But I've tried to police it, but just so you know, I don't want to, I park right out front of my business in the morning when I'm trying to unload, and sometimes I get caught in conversations. Next thing you know, I'm there. I was supposed to be there 15 minutes, and I was there 2 hours. So the magic number, I thought John can agree with me that we came up with was 2 hours, you know, just so businesses could do things like that. Maybe it's an hour. I mean, there is reason to park in front of your business sometimes. You just can't abuse it. You got to figure out how, and I always move my car, but my intention is sometimes to be there 5 minutes and I'm there for 2 hours. So, I mean, that's what happens when you're in business. So I think it's a challenge, and, you know, and I think they got to be dealt with, because he's right. There'd be a lot of free parking places in the village if people would park in the sand lot. And I have to tell you, half the people do it. So it's good.
Has the village considered some form of public transportation, like a bus for pickup of people to take them into the village?
That's my next question.
Yeah.
Not very seriously, I don't think. I mean, in my experience here in the last 3 years, there's not been a lot of discussion about that.
It seems there are so many people over 65 with a percentage that might be a consideration for the village, that maybe there should be some form of public transportation into the village for people. That might cut down on some of your traffic.
Vibrant retail business area that we all know about, Southern Pines, they have probably less parking than we do as a parking lot or on-street. There's a lot of on-street parking because that retail area is quite large. But the other thing that happens here is the streets are so narrow, just enough for traffic, that if somebody's going to, quote, park on the street, where are they going to park? On my lawn. That becomes a problem where other communities have a parking area on street that not on somebody's lawn. So it's like,
One thing we mentioned, or someone mentioned last night, was private-public cooperation. And to the point of what Jimmy said, and Resort has dozens of shuttle buses that run all over the place.
Glad you brought that up.
I don't think it would be unreasonable at least to ask them on our special event nights to run them from someplace else to our public event with regularity, so people could use a little bit more remote parking. I tried to park, I parked by the new brew pub going in wherever that is, relative to downtown, and tried to go to the Christmas tree lighting last year, remembering it's a dark village. And I had a heck of a time finding the downtown from where I parked. It's not a lengthy walk, but at night with no lights, it's pretty dark. It's hard to find where you are. But, you know, anything that would get, if the resort would pitch in when we need them, and maybe we could do something for them too. I'm not, there's a quid pro quo here, but I don't see the reason for not asking them to try to help.
And there is a program called Customer First Program the village started. I don't know if you're familiar with it. It was to have the businesses put the customer first and park and try to show them the way to put the customer first. And the restriction, if I'm doing this from memory, Jeff, I think it was 9 to 5. In other words, there was no restrictions at night or before 9. So they're trying to isolate the restrictions to the problem, so it's not a blanket 24 hours a day thing. And I don't know if that's still the case, but John, is that how you remember it, 9 to 5?
That was an idea.
That was the idea, yeah.
Just so folks know, for village events, we do run a shuttle from Village Hall here. We have our van that runs from the Village Hall, so you can park here in the park property, and we will shuttle you from here to downtown to events. So that is available for residents and event goers. So.
This transit stuff is awareness.
Great idea. I don't know if anybody knows about it.
We advertise
my
it for
thought.
all
Does anybody
events.
know about it?
Like the
It's
tree
on
lighting and
Tree
all that?
lighting, live after
Oh,
5. We
first
advertise it
time
on the
I've heard of
website, social media. It's in our activity guide.
glad I came to the meeting, so I
Yeah,
know.
yeah.
Who are you with? I'm sorry.
I'm the Parks and Recreation Director.
Okay, thank you.
You know, I'm just going to throw this out, and I don't know if it would ever work. When we had the Olympics in Lake Placid, we had remote parking because the village of Lake Placid was closed. The roads were closed. You could not drive in, and, other than deliveries, and residents had passes. But otherwise, there was remote parking, and they shuttled people in. And, I don't know what land availability is outside of the village in either of those two areas that we looked at last night. But for maybe special events, like I'm thinking the 4th of July parade, where you want to come down, as a resident you want to come down, but a lot of other people who are non-residents come. And you can't, and the parking's terrible for that. So I don't even know if that's a possibility, but I'm just throwing that out.
Provide that service, we have never run out of parking here at the Village Hall area.
That's because we don't know about it.
Nobody knows about it.
That's easy.
Promotion's a hard thing to overcome. We are communicating that in all our promotional materials.
Maybe you could do it on the phone lines like you're on your.
One of the problems too with satellite parking is providing a cure that has unintended consequences, like the satellite parking they have for the open. Folks don't come to the village as a result of the satellite parking. Is that not the case? So that folks take the transportation in and then take the transportation away, but do not remain in the village to spend money or to enjoy the village because of the cure.
They just have the pickup place in the wrong spot. The returning place should be, you come into the village to get the bus to go back out. That'd fix them.
Yeah, but I think that's a different situation for the open. I've used the trolleys for the open, which work very well, and I've also used the shuttle for the downtown events, and that works very well too, and I do shop in the area when I use the shuttle. So I think, it depends what the event is.
Ask one other question again, just because I'm trying to think of things that we've got to get into our document at some point. And one question I have for the group is, when we look at moving around the village in different ways, whether it's golf cart, automobile, biking, walking, those kind of things, what is the appetite to have all those things in the same corridor versus just having complete systems? And a while ago, a professor once explained to me that you have these systems and you want them to almost like a laced doily, be able to pick them up and they're connected, right? And so, for example, if we were to look at greenway opportunities and look like through your floodplain areas or your streams and things, but they're not on street. And so some people don't feel safe in those situations, for example, but they're actually a shorter distance between 2 points because you're not having to take all the different roads. So if we were to come up with recommendations to help you move around the village more efficiently or have more choices, but again, recognizing that in our roads, there's a lot of competition for that space. Are you just totally against us looking at maybe off-street opportunities to make these connections?
Suggesting allowing golf carts to go in the greenway trails. Is that what you have in mind?
Well, just having greenways off-street paths, whether they're for walking, biking, or golf cart, to be determined.
Yeah, I think that would be open to that. Maybe it gets to some of, not quite to Leo's comment earlier, you're thinking more about how the major thoroughfares are working, and as we're hearing, we all know they're busy, but...
I think it's a far more interesting idea.
It could be. Yeah, and that gets well, at least to my earlier point about connectivity, and how we can come from areas that are really not well connected, but could be, to the village and back and forth now, yeah.
So if through the week we come with recommendations where using different color markers and stuff, we actually look for systems that you could walk or bike or drive or transit and like, if some of those are off the street, that's not a big alarm. We can look for the best opportunities to connect destinations.
I think there's going to be a problem trying to cross state highways. Maybe then you need the bridge.
We'll have to look at solutions, yeah.
It's not so bad to cross the highway if you cross at the light, but I live over by the lake, and I go to the rehab center by the hospital, or, over here where the health center is, and the only problem that I really have is coming from where the water tower is. The path comes out to 211, and you have to go down the road a little bit to get to the traffic light. Now, I do that, but it would be nice if the walkway, bikeway, whatever, came to that intersection, and it'd be more clearly. Now, on the other side, the path actually starts at the traffic light. So it's, getting across is not a problem. 5 is not really that bad yet, but I don't go to the traffic light there, I get run over.
Are you having a discussion on whether there's separate paths, there's greenways, there's sidewalks, there's, like, possibly combining them all? Is that,
Well, I'm trying to think that if we did try to combine them, the demands for the amount of right-of-way that would be needed could go back to that character versus congestion story.
and,
So sometimes it might be having, like, for example, on the resort in some ways, and now it's being continued, but I know if I stay on a brick sidewalk that I'm kind of
right.
going down a path I know.
I think it's exciting to talk about solutions like that. One, I think if there's a plan, a real long-term plan that people can buy into, I think people would buy into it. So as long as it's complete, long-term, and it might take us a while to accomplish, but I feel like if they see some completeness and this is all of a sudden this is a real transportation alternative than just a path. I think if we could ever change the path system to transportation, that would be an incredible success. Yeah.
Two mindsets we're trying to change, right? One is that greenways aren't just recreation, they're a transportation system.
That's what I'd like to see, transportation. I went to vacation in Hilton Head, and I'm just shocked. There was literally more traffic on the bike path than on the road. And I never believed that was possible, but it was. Literally more people using the bike path system than the road. Not that we'll ever get there, but I just thought it was an interesting phenomenon that it can happen. In a resort community. It can probably only happen in a resort community. Like, we are a resort community. Yeah.
Well,
there's various ages. There's some on, no, it's mostly families, but the elderly are on it. And they even rent tricycles down there to accommodate different age groups. So, but it's just beach. People that go to the beach,
Can I go
Are
back
they
to
only-
ask a question? Excuse me. You want to go ahead?
Oh, well, I was talking about mindset, and not that I'm like the world's most dedicated biker, but my husband is, and one of the problems we had on Sanibel, which had a bike path, and then it became the common use path. And then people started complaining about the bikes on the path because people are actually using the bikes for exercise, not just to get around. And then there was a speed limit for the bikes on the path. Okay? Now, this is true. But the bikers who then were on the road where they're allowed to be, were not being respected by the cars because the cars are saying, well, why aren't you on the path? Well, I'm not on the path because I go faster than the speed limit on the, what I'm trying to get at really is part of the having bikes, if that's something you want in a community that you think that's good and it's going to alleviate traffic, is you have to change the mindset of the people who are driving the cars so that your bikers can be on the road and not have, I talked to someone one night who was on Sanibel who drove in for work, And he said, well, they should all be, these people, they should all be on the bike path. I said, well, they're allowed on the road and blah, 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 blah. And he said, well, if they get in my way, I can just hit them. You have to,
Ask their lawyer that same question.
yeah, yeah. But I mean, it was sheer stupidity. And you have to change, if that's what we want in a community, that people have that kind of use in the community, and this gets them out of their cars and on the road, and it's more helpful, then you have to change the whole mindset.
Education. Go back to traffic. Will there be data developed that tells us how many of the people that work in service-oriented facilities here live outside the village limits?
We can talk about getting information for sub-areas of the village. So if these workers are concentrated in an area or two or three or four, the answer is yes. If it's like individual, where is Scott going in his car? No. But if there's concentrations like that you can draw a circle around on a map, the answer is yes. Does that help?
We can't parse it out by employees versus customers.
No. We can parse it out by commercial truck versus not commercial truck, if that's useful.
Maybe just quickly, let me tell you, because this is really cool what the village has done. So traditionally, we would get data from NCDOT where they put a hose on the ground, and it just counts how many times something's rolled over that hose. And we really don't know any characteristics about it unless they space them out for speed or to get truck traffic. But what the village has done, and as part of this, we are working with the data, but the village took the initiative to buy the license. So they have this even after this project. It's called streetlight data. And what they're doing is they're buying data from the cell phone companies who are always tracking us anyways, right? And that data gets stripped out in terms of I guess the confidential stuff, whoever decides what that is. But we're able to look at the path of these cell phones as they're traveling through into the village. And what Scott can do and what they've done with village staff is you can start to pick out and say, tell me how many people are going to Moore County Hospital. And then because we all have area codes, for example, they can say, are they coming from this area code or a larger area code? It's kind of scary, right? Yeah. But it's also, an incredible rich data set looking at traffic flows, looking at how far people are coming from, that is available to us during this process. And before we leave, Scott has committed to teach Jeff and Natalie and Will and everybody how to use it so that it's available later on. Because it's a perpetual license. I mean, you have it. Oh, it's an annual. Okay. Well, I don't want to put the pressure on you to renew then, but they will have it after this project.
On that point, though, I don't know about everybody else's cell phone. Mine is an out-of-state cell phone.
Yes.
So how they going it's going to create some interesting spikes.
All the areas that we're interested in, we're going to draw lines and kind of segment it like this. You got this group, this area, and this area, and this area, and this area. So what you can do, for example, is take a road segment on Highway 211 and say, I'm interested in traffic that's passing through this point on 211. And it will generate data that shows how much of that traffic comes from or goes to any one of those zones that you describe. So it's independent of phone number. It's just where the signal picks up your cell phone signal first after being stationary, and then where is it going to? Where does it stop being stationary again?
Don't let my wife see that.
So to that end, if I could pull this. Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Well, I don't want to change the subject, but I want to readdress something that we were talking mostly about adult bikers and this. But I really think that, and I've thought this ever since we moved here, that I would love to see children being able to bike to the elementary school and where even out to O'Neill I think that that would take a lot of traffic off the roads in the mornings and in the afternoons. And I would just like to see that more. And I know communities sometimes start with like one day a week that, you know, they sort of say, this is the day that you do that, and maybe we could build on that. That's all I have to say about it.
No, those are good ideas.
I just kind of want to add, you had started with the paths and whether we would go for a path which wasn't necessarily on the road, just way to places. I just don't want to see us lose sight of the fact that some of the roads really do need a path. I don't want to see a sidewalk, that's been maybe, take it. But some of the roads, Morganton's a great example. Monticello, where I live, is a cut through between Morganton and Beulah. A lot of traffic on the road I live on, and I think it's because it's a cut through. A lot of blind curves. I know they put up signs a couple of years ago to try to help with that. They put up a few stop signs, but there's a lot of speeding on the road, and you can't really see. So people that are walking, either themselves or their dogs or their kids, there's no way a mom would push, say, a stroller on Monticello. So I guess I'm just saying that I don't mind the idea of paths. It could just get you places, but most people aren't going to say if they want a bike, put their bicycle on top of their car and drive it to a path to park and get from there to, say, the village. I think those busier roads, like the ones I named, would need paths in order to get to where they need to go. Yeah.
I get it. And so I want to pull all of those thoughts together into sort of the last question I'd like to put out there. Pinehurst is very unique because you have, in terms of street design, you have so many different ways streets have been built in this community. And I don't think I'm going on a limb to say some of these may not be able to be rebuilt to the same standards and sizes that they are today. But the way a street is designed and the uses that are around it help manage and alert motorists and others that they are on a certain kind of street, right? So I'm trying to think, on County Road 30A, that's in Florida, they had two developments. One was Rosemary Beach, which Brian knows pretty well, and they built it perpendicular to 30A. And so all the cars could still fly down the county road, and the pedestrians really felt nervous crossing it. Further down the road, they built, Brian, why am I spacing? What's next to Rosemary? Seaside. In Seaside, they took the development and they put it parallel to 30A and created all what transportation people call friction, right? So there's all this friction going on. So these cars, they slow down, not because the speed limit sign tells you to, but because the design of the street tells you to, that this is more than just moving cars as quickly as possible. And so you've got, even just in Pinehurst, you've got a lot of examples because as these neighborhoods have built over time, you can almost see how street design standards have changed as well. And so I want to see what you're most comfortable with. What streets within Pinehurst do you enjoy traveling through the most? Which ones are the safest? Which ones do you feel are the ones, if we had either infill development come in or if new development were to be built in purposeful places, what type of streets would you like to see built? So are they two
Talking about
lanes?
the look of the street or the size, the type in sort of terms of size?
I'm kind of leaving it open to see which way people
Well,
want
here,
to take it.
this may be a partial answer. Mr. Olmsted, Mr. Manning designed the original streets, curvilinear, of course, but also with a fair amount of landscaping, particularly longleaf pines. So if you go down Linden Road or you go down Midland Road, you see longleaf pines. That's a design element. It's a look, okay? And in fact, here at Village Hall, what we're trying to do now is to make Magnolia Road look more like that as it grows, both on the old side but on the new side coming up here to Village Hall.
The rocks are great traffic calming, by the way. We all have to do 2 miles an hour over.
That-
Like that?
Yeah, just, you're done.
Right. So the longleaf pine corridor look is a look of ambiance characteristic of Pinehurst, among other things, but that's maybe partial answer to your question.
I think you hit the nail on the head, because whether we'd solve all the traffic problems, but if you could have a character change that gets people to change their attitude driving through there, or a character change that gets them, instead of stressed out by the traffic, calm down, even though it's still, the traffic's still there. I think it would be neat if you could tell as soon as you made it to Pinehurst by the attitudinal change of the roadways. So I think you've hit it on the head. The design might be a way to bridge the gap between, the solutions aren't coming for a long time, might be the best way to bridge that gap between a real solution and getting there, yeah.
Matt, two questions that seem to be critical, and I think certainly the village knows those two questions. One is, who are the players? There are, all of us have sort of an idea of what I think we'd like to see in the village, but there are some players, such as State Highway Administration, that is a major player, and identifying who they are, I think, is critical in this whole planning process. The second is, what plans are in place and what's the status of those plans? For someone who sort of dips in, dips out occasionally when Village matters, I don't know what the status of the Route 5 bypass is. So, knowing what that status is would certainly, I guess, inform, what we can identify as us wanting. We've got a major problem on Route 5 that is only going to grow and get lesser, over the next few years. I don't know what the status of that is. Knowing what it is, I think, will certainly help in any kind of transportation or traffic solution.
Comment on that?
Anything with either Moore County CTP or state STIP projects?
Yes.
Or use them?
Be adopted shortly.
Just quickly, CTP is Comprehensive Transportation Plan. So in the state of North Carolina, you have these big long-range transportation plans that get done and are funded, and they have to be cost feasible, meaning you can only have projects for which you have money. The Comprehensive Transportation Plan is what DOT uses to create that wish list and to try to have that vision and stuff in place. And it's not by accident. All the maps and things done all over the state are required to look the same so they can piece together a state system. Sorry, I just want to make sure.
What you're determining is the Route 5 bypass, and we can talk about what most other folks refer to as the Western Connector. It is in the draft CPP, and it'll be coming to the council here in about a month for our municipal level ratification of that draft plan, make it official. With regard to what that means, at that point, it's just in a plan, and based on what we know from talking to our DOT partners about the feasibility of that plan, of that plan B, of that project being funded, we're probably at a minimum maybe 20 years out. It may be 30 years, it may be more, because until the development occurs, that project and that is kind of predicated on, they won't be able to make the case to be funded. So it's kind of it's a placeholder at this point, and it won't be funded unless the development occurs out to the southwest of Pinehurst that we expect is going to.
I was at that meeting on August 29th, and at the insistence of Foxfire Village, they have also included, not as a line on the map, but as language within the text of the plan, a second alternative, which is on the west side of Foxfire, and which runs from, I think it's 703, and then Flower Road or something like that, south. So along the western boundary of Moore County. And then as it gets south, before it hits Route 1, it has to cross over little bits of a couple other counties. And it was, I guess, they had not put it into the maps, and all the maps were there and printed, so they couldn't, they complained it was too late to put it on the map, but it's in the plan. And that would save there being this disruptive New Jersey Turnpike situation going on between Foxfire and Pinehurst. And the problem with having that Western Connect, even if it's a dashed line on the map, is anybody who's thinking about buying land there is going to look at it and say, well, you know, I don't want to, right now it's horse country and farming. And that's going to blow that away because nobody's going to want to invest in that with this line on the map, which is unfortunate, I think. I mean, yeah, we're going to have to do something about it eventually, but I think that's kind of drawing development.
That's what I was at the meeting as well.
Okay.
And they were really saying that
Yeah.
you put that road out there, and that's really going to increase, people are
Yeah.
going to sell their farms,
Mhm.
all of that, increased
Yeah.
subdivisions
Yeah.
and all of that.
Exactly.
So, no, I'm not for that.
Well, that's the catch-22, you just said. I mean, until you get that development there, starts coming in, you don't have the justification for getting through the priority process of the state, but you don't want that development, so you may never get to the point where the road is competitive for funding. So it's,
They were also saying that really, it was not going to really help the situation on Route 5, that the people who would be using that are not the ones who are using Route 5. So it has nothing really to do with it. I mean, that's what I took away.
That's right, that's right, that's right.
I think it's, I wasn't at that meeting, but from what I have seen from the presentations from DOT, it's accurate to say that their projections are such that if the project was built in 20 or 30 years, the resulting traffic on Route 5 wouldn't be any better than it is today, but it will be much better than if you don't build it. Yeah, that's what I asked them that question, and what they said is the existing traffic like you have today would be the traffic. It wouldn't lower it, but it wouldn't double like it's supposed to. So I think it would have a positive impact on traffic on 5, according to the stats they gave you. Is that fair? Yeah. Yeah.
Harris Teeter,
Answer
a
to-
lot, especially, I've seen since Harris Teeter opened, a lot more traffic on Morganton Road.
Answer to the problem, I think, is what I think Bert said earlier. Sometimes we're trying to fix what we see rather than fix the problem. And like us all, if it's taking me too long to go from one point A to point B on this road, what am I going to do? Put up with it, or am I going to find another place? And another place happens to be 5 at this point, and Morganton Road, they're getting worse and worse, and people now are turning more, from Morganton Road, turning left to go down on 5, and almost half of that traffic goes back into to the houses by the little circle and over by the lake. So it's like, why are they doing that? It's a never-ending problem unless we fix what's the cause of all of this going on.
so we've gone through, we need to probably move along too, because we're at the end of our hour. Yeah.
Good point. That's the plan, Judy. Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah, we conceptually, we have plans to do that at gate points on 5, on Morganton, on 211. But again, what we will be doing is we'll be describing today's traffic. And part of what we have to wrestle is wrestling with
projections for growth south and west of Pinehurst are true, either in scope or in timing, it could not happen at the scale that's projected, or it could happen at the scale that's projected, but, much farther off or sooner, whatever. But the Western Connector is designed to cope with that growth and prevent it from continuing to congest traffic on 211 and 5 in Morganton. And somebody made a comment about, John, you made a comment about, people are choosing the path of least resistance, right? And we all, I think, very well understand that 5 and Morganton are linked to the traffic circle. And to the extent that people are frustrated with traveling on the traffic circle, it's pushing their traffic onto 5 and Morganton. And so, to help the situation on 5 and Morganton, you got to address the traffic circle. Well, the best thing that DOT has come up with for the traffic circle says that, by 2030 or 2040, kind of like the discussion about 5, if they make the best possible improvement that they can to the traffic circle, in 20 years, the traffic's going to be back to where it is right today. It's going to be back to where it is today. And so, there's only so much you can do with a traffic circle, and we've got to find other ways to take traffic off the lot. And Linden Road.
Well, as Scott had mentioned, we're sort of on borrowed time according to our schedule. But with this event, and it goes on for several days, if you want to talk more transportation, you want to come to one of the tables and talk about a very specific issue, it's an open forum. So this doesn't end the transportation discussion. It just gave us an opportunity to concentrate it. But if anything comes up, either now you want to continue talking to Scott, or if you want to drop in any other day, just let us know, and we're happy to keep going. But otherwise, you were our first attendees at our first meeting, so thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Yeah, of course.